we also have another special guest and to tell the story of blockade running and the exploits of C.C. Morse. So congratulations are really in order to our next guest, who's Alexander Patterson. Alex is a South Brunswick High School student, and he recently placed first in the individual documentary category of the Southeast Regional National History Day competition. His video is about 10 minutes long, and you can watch that video, Blockade Runners of the Cape Fear. Again, that's available on our Facebook page. I'd also like to recognize, I think she's here today, Jennifer Bryant, who is Alex sponsoring teacher at South Brunswick. And of course, I want to recognize Mrs. Patterson and the family and friends who are joining us today. So Alex has agreed to join us and spend a few minutes explaining blockade running and some of the exploits of Christopher Columbus. Alex, if you unmute yourself, and we can look forward to hearing your thoughts.
So shortly after the Civil War started in 1861, the Union had to create a strategy of cutting off supply of the Confederacy. The United States came up with a strategy known as the Anaconda Plan. The Anaconda Plan was a plan to block off southern ports by the U.S. naval blockade to stop the supply of materials and to take control of the Mississippi River. This mitigated the flow of materials into the Confederacy and created isolation. Blockade runners brought materials and weapons into southern ports since they were able to run in between the Union blockade. They were able to do this because of the design of their ship and the geography of the area. Blockade runners would purchase the materials from a place like Bermuda or the Bahamas when it originally came from England. One of the most important places for the blockade runners to take the materials to was Wilmington. Wilmington was important since it had direct railroad access to Richmond. It was one of the only Confederate ports after 1864. Blockade runners also had an 80% success rate when entering Wilmington through the Cape Fear River. So when they entered the Cape Fear River to reach Wilmington during the 1860s, there were two ways to enter. The old inlet, which still exists today, is between Oak Island and Bald Head Island. And then the new inlet, which was closed off by the rocks in the 1870s, was between Federal Point and Bald Head Island. This was one of the best and most successful options for blockade runners. The blockade runners also made use of the Price's Creek lighthouses when entering the old inlet. Blockade runners were designed to be faster than the Union blockade and to be hidden. The long and narrow design of blockade runners allowed them to outrun the blockade. And its shallow draft allowed it to move swiftly through shallow waters. They were also painted gray to reduce their profile, and some even had collapsible smokestacks. They also used anthracite coal, which is a smokeless coal, which reduced their profile even more. Christopher Columbus Kit Morse is the blockade runner featured here. Morse served as a pilot to operate three of the most successful blockade runners, which were the Kate, Cornubia, and the Advance. He was born in Smithville in June 29, 1829. Three of his siblings also ended up being pilots or captains on blockade runners. In 1853, he married Mary Virginia, also of Brunswick County, and they moved to Amelia Island, Florida, where he was a keeper of a lighthouse for a few years. Close to the start of the Civil War, he was an experienced Cape Fear bar pilot in Brunswick County. The first blockade runner he piloted was the Kate in 1862. The Kate was known for bringing the yellow fever into Wilmington. In August of 1862, the crew aboard the Kate were infected with the yellow fever when they reached Wilmington, and then the disease spread. By November of that year, about 800 died from the disease. That same month, the ship wrecked near the mouth of Bonnet's Creek. Morse and the crew made it safely to shore. In 1863, Morse piloted the Cornubia, which successfully made many trips between Wilmington and Bermuda of that year. In November of 1863, The Cornubia was chased by a U.S. Navy ship, and the crew beached and abandoned the ship 11 miles north of the new inlet. And then the final blockade runner Morse piloted was the Advance in 1864. The Advance was a fast ship for its time, but it did not move well through shallow water. And overall, Morse made a total of 55 successful runs in all of the 3 ships he piloted.
Well, thank you very much, Alex. You really did a fine job. I really hope that you and actually you and all those watching this video will join us again as we continue to discover Southport history.